If you feel stuck, I'm going to tell you the reason, and it's not what you think. It's not because you're lazy, and it's not because you're not smart enough, and definitely not because you haven't found your purpose. You're stuck because your life has no forcing function. That's it. You have no constraint, which makes progress non-negotiable. So what happens is your days default to comfort. And when your days default to comfort, your life doesn't move. Most people think that being stuck is a motivation problem. They think they need a better morning routine, a new productivity app, a new plan, or a new burst of inspiration. That's all cope. Motivation is irrelevant if nothing forces you to act. Because when nothing forces you, your brain will always choose the safest interpretation of reality. It will default to the option where you don't have to be judged, where you don't risk looking stupid, and where you don't have to feel the discomfort of doing something real. So you prepare, you plan, you research, and you get ready. And you convince yourself that you're moving, but you're not. You're pacing in a cage. So here is what a forcing function actually is. A forcing function is something that makes the decision automatic. It removes negotiation, collapses optionality, and creates consequences if you do not show up. And if you've ever had a deadline that actually mattered, a real deadline, you know exactly what this means. For example, when you have a plane to catch, you don't negotiate getting up. When your rent is due, it doesn't matter what your mood is. You don't get to negotiate your way out of not paying it. When other people are involved in a group plan that you've already committed to, you don't sit there journaling about whether or not you're in the right mood to socialize. You move. Not because you became a different person, but because the environment changed. The constraint changed and the cost of inaction became real. And that is what you're missing. Most men these days live in a relatively low consequence world. Nobody's coming to punish you for drifting. If you waste a day, nothing breaks. If you waste an entire week, no alarms go off. And if you waste a whole month of your life, you can still just tell yourself that you're figuring it out. And that is exactly why you get stuck. Because the real cost of drifting like this is delayed. It shows up later as regret, bitterness, and that sick feeling in your stomach when you realize that you've been living your whole life on repeat. And this is why you can be smart and still be stuck. Intelligence by itself does not create motion. Constraints do. And smart men, ironically, are often the most stuck of all because they can rationalize and justify anything to themselves. They can build themselves an internal narrative for why today was not the right time, why it wasn't the day, and explain to themselves why they need more time, more certainty. They can literally make procrastination sound like a strategy. And then they wake up at 30 years old and they fucking panic. So let me show you what stuck looks like in real life. It looks like you doing things that feel productive but that don't actually move the scoreboard. Tweaking your Notion setup instead of making the call. Watching how-to videos instead of just doing the reps. Thinking about starting the business instead of speaking to future customers. Fixing your logo, your website, your gear, or your plan before you've even touched reality. It looks like saying, I'm going to start soon. Where soon is a fantasy. Soon is where dreams go to die. If this sounds at all like you, your life isn't stuck. Your life is perfectly designed to produce your current results. Your results are not a mystery, they are a receipt. And if your days are built around low stakes, your outcomes will be low stakes. If your day has no pressure, then your life has no momentum. And if you have no forcing function, then you will drift forever, because drifting feels safe. So the solution isn't motivation, and it's not more strategic planning. It's creating a forcing function. And there are only a few types of forcing functions which actually work. One of them is social consequences. You put yourself in a situation where other people are watching and you can't disappear without paying a price. This could be a coach, a group, a public commitment, or a regular check-in with someone who will call you out on your excuses. Not because you need accountability like a child, but literally just because you're human. Humans behave differently when they're observed. Another one is financial consequences. You put money on the line, prepay, you book, you commit. You invest in something that forces you to show up because not showing up would feel like self-harm. People hate losing money more than they love winning. So use that. Another one is structural consequences. This means that you change the environment so that the default behavior is progress. You remove distractions, you remove easy escapes, you remove low-value inputs, and you design the entire day so it's easier to do the right thing than the wrong thing. Discipline is a myth if your environment is built to sedate you. Another one is identity consequences. And this one is the most brutal. This is where you create a standard for yourself that you absolutely refuse to violate. It means you decide what kind of man you are, and you treat every micro decision as a vote for that identity. This is effectively you deciding that breaking promises is beneath you, and you act accordingly. So if you try and solve being stuck by trying harder, then you're going to fail, because trying harder relies on your mood, whereas forcing functions don't care. What you need is a system that still works on the days where you feel like shit, when you're tired, distracted, uncomfortable, not feeling confident, or feeling insecure. And for a lot of people, that is most days. So here's the simplest version of the fix. Pick one output that you care about and build the forcing function around it. If you want to get in shape, the output is simple. You train 4 times a week. No debate. So you create the forcing function. You pre-book sessions. You train with someone. You set a public standard, pay for a coach, structure your schedule. Whatever makes skipping it feel expensive. And if you want money, then the output is simple again. You just do the thing that creates opportunity for new money every day. If you're in business, this is calls, this is outbound DMs, sales, shipping, pitching, applying, negotiating. You create a forcing function, a daily quota that you must hit, a scoreboard, a consequence if you miss, a public commitment or a person to report to, a system that makes it automatic. And if you want a business, it's simple again. You speak to customers and you sell, not branding and not aesthetics, not perfecting the product. Customers, sales, delivery, and repeat. You commit to a daily number, you block the time, remove distractions, and you touch reality before you do anything else. And here's the key that will change how you view your life. If you don't have a forcing function, you're not on a journey, you're in a loop. A loop is where you keep telling yourself that you're building towards something, but your daily behavior never changes. And if your daily behavior doesn't change, the outcome doesn't change either. And that's why being stuck feels like being trapped inside your own head, because you are. The world isn't trapping you. You've trapped yourself, and the trap is comfort. So it all boils down to this. Your potential doesn't matter. Your intentions don't matter, and your plans don't matter. What matters is whether you have a forcing function which turns action into the default state. If you feel stuck, you don't need another idea. You need a constraint. You need a deadline that you can't ignore, a standard that you can't violate, a setup where nothing hurts more than not doing the work. Because until you have that, you keep living the same day on repeat. And one day you'll look up and you'll realize you've been stuck for years.